Hello, I'm Dr. Orville Weyrich. I have a PhD in chemistry from the University of Tennessee, and I am a naturopathic medical doctor. But today I want to talk about economics and the truth about taxes. So, basic truth about taxes, number one, nobody likes being taxed. But that's pretty much something that is going to happen. There's an old saying that says, nothing is certain except death and taxes. But some level of taxation is necessary. For example, when our country was first formed, we didn't have the Constitution. We had a form of government that was called the Articles of Confederation. But this particular form of government didn't have sufficient power to tax and basically couldn't get the money it needed to function. So our Constitution was drafted as a replacement for the Articles of Confederation. So any activity that is taxed is going to be suppressed. For example, there's a tax on tobacco and cigarettes. Partially, it's intended to raise money for the government. Partially, it's intended to discourage smoking, which is considered to be a health hazard. On the other hand, any activity that is not taxed will be enhanced. For example, tax loopholes are created to encourage certain behaviors by certain players in the economy. Now, I'm not going to talk about public policy, about pros and cons of this or that public policy, other than to observe that public policy dictates which activities will be taxed or untaxed. And tax policy ultimately determines the prosperity of our nation or any other nation. And who you vote for does matter. Elections have consequences, as it's been said. Let's look at some examples of taxes. Sales taxes are used by various cities and states as a way of raising revenue. And it tends to be what's called a regressive tax, in that it impacts lower income people more than it does high income people. And so sales taxes are not necessarily a good way to go. Use taxes make more sense. If you're using a highway, for example, you should help pay for building and maintaining the highway. And so a gas tax makes a lot of sense. Toll roads, same thing. In Europe, they have a value-added tax, which is similar to a sales tax, except in the United States, sales taxes are only applied to the final retail sale to the consumer. Raw materials are not taxed, and the partially built components are not taxed. On the other hand, in Europe, the value-added tax is a taxation on every step of the production. So when someone digs some minerals out of the mountain and sells it to a manufacturer, there's a tax on that transaction. When the first manufacturer takes the minerals and refines them to a finished element, steel or whatever, and sells that to someone who builds cars, for example, there's a tax on that stage. And so it's sales tax basically on steroids. Then we have tariffs. Tariffs are a form of sales tax, but they are only levied on other countries that produce goods and services that are sold into our country. And so we'll talk about tariffs. One political candidate is really bullish on tariffs, and the other political candidate is more in favor of income tax, especially taxing the rich so that they pay their fair share, whatever that is. Which brings us to income tax. Income